confusing, but hey, we'll just start the show anyway. Good evening and welcome to another episode of Transcending Veils. I am your host, D.E. Riley, and these beautiful ladies over here next to me are Audra Moon and Alexis Reeves. You guys doing all right tonight?
We're surviving. It's great.
Yep.
Made it through the first half of the holidays. Now we gotta get this other crap behind us. And sorry if I'm not a big Christmas person per se, so I just kind of go through the motions for everybody else. Now, something I did want to talk about, if you guys are regulars to the show and you turn in the show quite often, if you'll notice, the beautiful and talented Audra Moon has a whole new look about her.
I do.
You are not the mistress of darkness anymore. What happened?
Wait. It'll come back. You can be blonde and be the mistress of darkness.
Okay.
I am going to say, though, with the holidays, as you touched on, your mistress of darkness is looking very plain Jane, and it's fine. We're just going to skip right past that, and we're going to, yeah.
All right. Yeah. Something I want to touch on, speaking of mistress of darkness, that I had an epiphany last week, right? They had this little pop-up thing on Facebook, which Morticia Addams was your favorite, and they listed all the different Morticia Addams up there. And I said, well, actually, Carolyn Jones, the original. I mean, I had such a crush on her when I was a kid, and I went, bing! Wait, is this like a Freudian moment? Because now I may have discovered why I'm attracted to like goth girls and shit. That's because it goes all the way back to when I was a kid watching the Addams Family. But Morticia Addams was smoking. I mean, she was beautiful. All right, tonight we have a great holiday show in the spirit of the holiday season, which we're in. We're going to discuss man's inhumanity to man. What better way to bring in the holidays, right? And by that, we mean we're going to look at some of the methods and devices used in torturing other human beings down through history. Some of these will be well known. Some of them are going to be, really oddball stuff that you may have never heard of. But this is such an interesting topic because you look at some of this stuff and you think, how can anyone be that freaking cruel, to even come up with something like that? My mind doesn't work like that, So it just amazes me how, I'm sure these people that sadism has something to do with this. But how their minds work like that. So, starting out, Audra, tell us about one of them that you have come across, if you would.
Okay, so this one's pretty bad, but in true Audra fashion, it's my favorite. We have scaphism. If you've ever heard of that, I'm sure there's a couple of weirdos out there like me who have already heard of it. But scaphism was one of the gnarliest, most disgusting forms of torture and execution. They would use it as forms of torture, but it almost always resulted in execution. And it was in the old Persian Empire where this is recorded. It was usually it had something to do with murder or treason or anything like that. So what they would do is the accused would be put in a boat. And in this boat, they would take another boat and almost make it like a coffin with holes only for their arms, their legs, and their head to be exposed. Sometimes it would be their genitalia exposed. Now, the fun part of this is that boat would be put out on stagnant water. And what accumulates on stagnant water? Mosquitoes, bugs, nasty stuff. And they would force feed the accused honey and milk, which would eventually cause massive diarrhea. And remember, they're enclosed in like a capsule, which would draw more insects to them. And they would also be lathered in honey and milk. Their skin, their appendages that were sticking out of this boat, whether it was the arms, the legs, the head, the genitalia, everything was covered in honey and milk. So they would be swarmed. Eventually, these insects would slowly eat away at them, at their appendages. They would get in because the diarrhea would, and, the human excrement would draw more insects, more flies. They would lay their eggs in the accused. They would burrow into the accused skin. They would get into their intestines and slowly eat this person from the inside out. Gangrene would set in, and sometimes the most, I don't remember his name, but there was a guy, I believe he worked with the Persian army, and he accidentally killed the emperor's son, and he was condemned to this fate. And he lasted 17 days because it is such a slow process.
Whoa.
The interesting thing is they would keep feeding you every day milk and honey to ensure that you wouldn't die of starvation and you wouldn't die of dehydration. The leading cause of death in that was sepsis and gangrene. So that was pretty gnarly. And it was a slow, agonizing death, and anyone who has watched somebody, because sepsis is still a thing, septicemia is still a thing. Mm-hmm. Anyone who has had a family member or known someone who has died from septicemia knows that it is an awful way to go. So imagine not having medical intervention and it being used as an execution and torture method.
Good God.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I can't even. That's,
and all the maggots.
To think that
my skin was itching listening to that.
Me out as it is, so.
17 days. I mean, that's just inconceivable that, you're floating around in all that crap and shit and stuff. There's no other way to put it, and, man, that is just
eaten alive by bugs. Oh.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, them laying eggs in your skin and finding ways into your body through open orifices.
Yeah.
No,
thank you.
Yeah. If you've ever had, anything like that, anything that burrowed into your skin, whether it's a tick or a chigger or anything, just the thought of that insect being in there, is bad enough. Yeah. But you're just literally covered in that, and there's no way out. There's no way out. You're stuck, That's, oh my God, and I tell you what, because I literally, and I'll be quite honest with you, I am the atypical male when it comes to getting sick, I'm a big whiny baby and, I need to be taken care of 100%, and all that kind of shit that drives my wife crazy. So I can't imagine, what it would be like to go through that. Oh God.
Yeah.
You'd have to mentally check out for that. Just completely gone.
It was funny because I was having a conversation with somebody last night and we were talking about, how people's fight or flight kicks in with certain scenarios. People, you know, it's all fight for me. Demons, ghosts, monsters, goblins, ghouls, don't care what it is. I'm going to fight. If it's a bug, I'm flying. See you later. I'm running the other way. My flight kicks in and I am off. No, thank you. So with something to that caliber of like bug, but I got to give it to him. That's creative and I like it. So.
Can you imagine the discussion though? You know, just sitting around going, okay, now what can we do to this guy that just really okay, let's give him uncontrollable diarrhea. Oh wait, hey, I got something better. You know, let's lock his ass. Let's lock his ass in a box.
You know what's attracted to shit? Lies. Yep.
You know, this guy's sitting around drinking going, I got one better than that. Lock him in a box with diarrhea and flies.
Yep.
And then we'll send the mosquitoes.
Oh my God. Yep.
Oh jeez. Oh yeah, that's a tasty one for sure.
I feel like milk and honey. Oh yeah. Yeah, they got a feast. But I feel like milk and honey back in ancient times or medieval times was like a go-to thing for execution, you know, or torture. So if you've ever heard of goat torture, they would put honey and they would put milk. Sometimes they would put salt on people's feet and have these goats lick these people's feet. And it sounds like, oh my God, not that bad, right? But in reality, a goat's tongue is so rough, it's ripping the skin right off the bottoms of your feet. And same thing. People would die of infection, septicemia, whatever. You know, and then I've heard of execution methods where people would be tied to tree trunks and lathered in milk and honey and wait for wildlife, not bugs, but wildlife, bears and, you know, badgers and I mean, whatever, coming to just take bits of flesh off and
What lovely tidbit of wholesome entertainment do you have for us, Alexis?
Okay, so when I was doing research on this, I was very surprised to find out that, like, have you ever heard of the brazen bull?
Yes.
Yes, you have? Okay. So that actually was a myth. And I think that was the one that was mentioned in Dante's Inferno. And they couldn't actually find any evidence that anyone was put into a metal bowl and boiled, because that's basically what they do. So that's what I found really interesting, because you see it depicted in movies and stuff like that as, you know, historical evidence. It didn't actually happen. So there is that. And then the Iron Maiden, which is a coffin that has spikes in it. And for a long time, they believed that was real, but then they realized they couldn't actually, again, find any evidence of that. So moving on from that, because I thought that was a little interesting. The one that really stuck out to me was the Scavenger's Daughter. And I don't know if maybe it was because of the name of it, but it's this. Okay. So yeah, it's a metal contraption that I do believe, if I'm remembering correctly, it goes over your shoulders, comes down, so your hands are like this, right? And then it goes down to your feet, and it has hinges on the side. So it can close shut on you, forcing your body to go down like this. So say this is you staying there, just, like that. And it was so forceful that it could cause you to bleed from your mouth and your ears. And it was a really slow way to die, you know, if you think about it. And so there was that one. And it's just a very interesting name for it. But then there was the burning shoe, or the burning boot, which originally it started out as cowhides. And you know how leather shrinks when it gets wet? Well,
Yeah.
they would dunk someone's foot in boiling water, so it eventually just formed to their foot so tightly that it would cause the circulation to be cut off. And oh, look at that! You're getting gangrene. You're getting everything else. Your foot goes away. Yeah, gets eaten away by infection. But they
Yeah.
decided to upgrade that to a metal boot that they would pour melted lead or any kind of metal into, just burn your foot away. So there was that
Right.
one, or boiling water.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? My search history is very questionable at this point on my phone. After looking all this up.
My search history. Also,
Yeah, I mean, it was questionable to begin with. Now it's really questionable, but questionable. But
you know what that reminds me of? The what is it? The boiling boot.
It's the burning boot. Yeah,
burning boot.
Yes.
So, the original story of how like Disney movies, Disney princesses, those came, those were, those were dulled down and made cutesy from the original stories. And,
yeah.
I do believe that Snow White's original story, and this is just what it reminded me of. Snow White's original story was after she had the poison apple and blah, 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 blah. The queen, the evil queen, did not get struck by lightning and fall off a cliff. At Snow White's wedding, they forced her to wear iron shoes that were heated over hot coals.
Oh.
And she was forced to dance in them at Snow White's wedding.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. I did not know that.
That's immediately what I thought of.
Now
it had to have been a correlation.
When you started out, you were talking about the boot being made from leather.
Yes.
In doing research on that, I found that was called a Scottish effort. Is what that one was called. And it was made out of rawhide. It was almost like a rawhide sock. And they would pull it on, and it was tight to begin with, but it was soaked in water. As it dried out, it would shrink like leather does. And the thing was, it didn't cause enough pressure to break bones, but it did cause enough pressure to dislocate every bone in your foot and your ankle. So, you had to sit there and suffer through that. So it progressed on to what you said, the metal boot with the boiling water or oil or whatever they put in there. It was just, either way, it just, and the funny thing is you talk about this stuff as a means of torture, but they always ended up, very few you came out of them, very, very few. They always seem to end up, in you're going to die. You're going to die from something, that this method of torture involves. And I've only found one. I found one, and it was a method of punishment, and it was definitely torture that they used in the 17th and 18th century, and it was called the picket. And what that was just that. It was like a tent stake or a horse picket, a wooden stake that was driven into the ground. And as a form of punishment, you were tied by one hand up over your head and lifted off the ground and then sat down barefoot on top of that picket. Not the pointy end, the flat end. And you had to stand there supporting yourself on that picket with just enough tension in that rope to keep your balance for sometimes hours. Now, it didn't cause any permanent damage at all, but they said the pain was just excruciating for this thing because, you can't move. There's no way to get relief off of that foot, so you just have to stand there and bear it, and that was that, but that was one that people actually lived through. They, they didn't wasn't a fatal torture. But in another one that it could sometimes be fatal, and sometimes not. And this was one that I just thought of when you were talking. And it's called the they sometimes call it the Dublin smile or the Glasgow smile. And they still do this. I mean, to this day, the gangs over in Ireland and Scotland have been known to do this. And what they do is they'll take a sharp knife and they will cut slits in the side of your mouth here. And then they will either jump on your crotch or break your leg or your arm, causing you to scream. And when you scream, it rips everything open. And it gives you this really nasty looking smile. And there is evidence, if you will look up the actor, the current day actor, his name is Tommy Flanagan.
Okay.
He was in Sons of Anarchy. He was in Braveheart. He's been in several different movies. But if you look him up, you'll see the scars that he's got that they had done this to him, and he still carries those scars to this day. So yeah, it's nothing, like I said, of in ancient times. That's a modern day thing that they still do. But yeah, it can sometimes be fatal. But if you can imagine, the corners of your mouth are split, and you scream, it's just going to keep going. I mean, there's nothing stopping it. But good stuff.
That was sort of like that one that I looked up where it didn't usually cause fatalities, but it was called the tramp chair. And it was this metal contraption, like little cage. It was like a mini cage that was sat in a chair position, and they put people in, and they usually used it to humiliate them and parade them around town. And they could leave them upwards of 2 days in there. But the problem was it would get so hot in there because it was metal or super cold that it was very, very uncomfortable. And, people could poke at, who was ever in there, so, but it didn't really cause any fatalities. It's just, you're trapped, barely able to move, can't move your arms up because it's just so narrow.
Right.
So, but that reminded me of what you were saying. No fatalities. So.
Yeah. All right. What else you got, Audra? Hit me with some good stuff.
Okay, good stuff. Judas's Cradle. Have you heard of that one? Okay.
I don't think I've heard of that.
Ooh, okay. So, Judas's Cradle. Yeah, this one is not as slow as scaphism. It's not there's no bugs. Judas's Cradle was it was a device that was shaped like a pyramid, so point and comes down. Now, it was used for both men and women. If you can use your imagination, you know where I'm going with this. Their legs and their arms would be tied, and they would be sat. Men would be sat right on their anuses, and women vaginally would be propped up on the thing. And slowly, they would add weight onto the person that was being tortured and accused of whatever they were being accused of, and slowly they would drop. They would start sliding down this. Now you got to think, okay, point's going to be very uncomfortable, but it ain't going to kill you. Eventually, with all that weight, they're sliding down further, and it's getting wider and wider and wider. It would cause, most of the time, it would cause internal bleeding. would lead to infection because everything back then led to infection. Yeah, that one was ow.
So it was gravity control, and it would literally just split you in two. Slowly.
Pretty much. But it's almost like the other one that I have here. It's the Pair of Anguish, if you've ever heard of that. Okay, so the Pair of Anguish.
Alexis sitting over there going, yeah, hey, do that one.
So the Pair of Anguish was mostly used against women. But it was also used in the event of liars, blasphemers, or however you say it, like blasphemers. Women who were committing adultery, women who were, who performed illegal miscarriages, like forced miscarriages or whatever. And it was also used against homosexuals. Anyone who was gay or anything like that would succumb to this. Now, this was not technically used to kill anybody. It wasn't used for execution or anything like that. But again, infection, internal bleeding. So with women, any woman who was accused of adultery and, forced miscarriage, they would insert, and it wasn't very big. It was a little tiny thing, and it looked like a pear. Sometimes they would put spikes at the end of them, and this thing would be inserted for the women. It would be inserted into their vaginas. For gay men, it would be inserted into their anuses, and for liars and blasphemers, it would be put into their mouths. These things were rarely cleaned, which caused infection. Okay. But what they would do is it shaped like a pear, and it had 4 petals that were closed. And at the end of each petal, they would sometimes fasten spikes to them. And there'd be a key, and whoever was torturing them would turn this key, and it would slowly open and spread and spread and spread until finally, it's completely torn your mouth or your anus or your girly parts apart. So it was a good one. That one was a good one. But they didn't, like I said, they didn't use it for execution or anything like that. But most women, because women were the ones who were, predominantly tortured with this, they would succumb to like injuries because of infections. And there's just so, and like, you don't clean it. So it's like, okay, so you got one coming in, and he is an accused gay man. So now that's going up his bum. And then next thing you know, you got someone who is a liar, and that same thing's going right in their mouth.
You look back, in history, and especially in the European history, during medieval times, things like that, they were not the cleanest people anyway. No. They were nasty, to say the least.
The women in medieval times used to use like sheep's stomach, like dipped in lye, as like menstruation pads.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They would like
so much.
Yeah.
So and much nasty.
They would use like lye for like their hair. Like all these people died because of injections, and then like everything they were using for like beauty standards, you know, like lie for the light.
Yeah, it's just, you know, that you go to Renaissance fairs and wonder, do these people know the history of, you know, who they're portraying? Yep. Because they weren't that beautiful, you know.
Yeah.
There was no knight in shining armor by any means, you know. Maybe had shit stains all over it, but you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's, you know, and it's like we're talking about so many of them, you know, whether it be torture to gain information or torture as a punishment, they didn't end well. You were going to die, you know, no matter how lenient these you know people were with you, you're going to end up dead by the time you're done. You know, that's all there is to it. And some of them were just so heinous. I know the American Indians had this great one. They would tie you to a tree, and they would cut about an inch slit in your belly and drag out your intestines. Oh, a good, you know, 20, 30 feet, and stake it out in front of you. So you could watch the coyotes and the cute little furry woodland creatures come up and snack on your ass, you know, as you die, you know. So
sometimes they would make you run around. They would make you run. Oh, yeah. I know that.
Yeah, it just, you know, it's like, how do you, like I said, my mind doesn't work like that. It just doesn't work like that. Is how you can sit around and devise something like that would be so heinous. I mean, I don't know. You know, I just don't know. You know, I came across one. It was called the hungry rat torture, and this involved taking a person naked and strapping them down to a board. They could not move. And they would put a cage or a bucket on this person's stomach that had rats in it. And then they would put hot coals or set the top of the bucket on fire. Well, these rats panic, and they can't get out of this thing but one way, and that's through you, you know? And you know, if somebody wanted information, all they would have to do would be to tell me about this. And I'm spilling my fucking beans, you know. You can have whatever you want. I don't care, you know. But I can't imagine how long you would have to lay there before, you know, you finally died and feel, you know, these animals gnawing their way through you to get out, to try and save their own lives, you know. And oh God, how can you do that, you know?
Yeah.
But it, you know, it was just so crazy. And that was, you know, what, during the, I got it down here, 16th and 17th century, during the Dutch Revolt, that they used that. And, you know.
I do have a fun fact for you about that.
Yes.
Okay. So that actually was also recorded being used in Argentina up until 1990.
Really? Oh, my Lord.
Yeah, by like, mostly by like, you're looking at like drug cartels and like stuff like that. But it was still used in South America and most specifically Argentina up until 1990.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, you know, it's like, you know, think you know, Captain Morgan, the pirate captain, he went on to become the governor of Jamaica, got pardoned for all his past aggressions, you know, the whole nine yards. But one of the things that he liked to do is when he was sacking a town, he would find those elders of the town, and he would hang those gentlemen by their genitalia until they told him where the treasure was. And if they didn't tell him, they hung there until it, you know, separated and popped off. And,
Oh.
and yeah, think about that next time you make yourself a rum and Coke.
Yeah.
Good old Captain Morgan, Yeah, something to think about. But yeah, there's just, and it's like you said, even today, I mean, it still goes on.
Mm-hmm.
It's still, you can literally right now watch the news and see it, firsthand. But it's just terrible. I mean, I cannot do it. I cannot fathom it. Alexis, you got anything else for us out there concerning this wonderful hobby? And
Well, speaking because we were talking about like in the past, specific people that would torture, but like you think about current day like serial killers and stuff like I don't know if you've probably heard the toy box killer, David Parker Ray or David Ray Parker. He devised this torture chamber in his cargo trailer, and he would lure in. It was usually sex workers. He and I think it was his wife was his accomplice, and they would lure these women in, and they would take them, torturing them in this. It looked like, because I looked at pictures of it and stuff, and I'd listened to a few documentaries on this already, and there's the pictures online of it, and it looks like a hospital bed, more like an OBGYN, table for women to sit on. It has the stirrups and everything, and they'd be strapped down and they'd get electrocuted and just, and it was always sexual, torture for him with them. And it was just unimaginable things that he would use on them. And so you think about it, like you said, like it's still going on today. It's never going, I don't think torture will probably ever end, because there's always going to be someone thinking up the next worst thing to do to someone. And it's just, because you'd think you'd have.
I just want to mention to our viewers on YouTube, yes, we will be showing you pictures of these devices and all this good stuff.
Yeah.
So tune in, because they'll be flashing up on the screen when we talk about them. But yeah, it's and a lot of people almost do this as a hobby, study these things, and and it's fascinating to me because, like I said, I can't wrap my mind around it. I can't comprehend anyone with the mindset of actually doing this. Now, I'm not saying I haven't thought about doing stuff to somebody that's really pissed me off before. I'm a human, and I think all humans, whether they'll admit it or not, have that fantasy in the back of their head of, okay, this person has screwed me over. If I ever had the chance, I would like to go bop, 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 and just make them suffer, and, it's, I've had that, I've gone through that. I've got 3 ex-wives. Hell yes, I've gone through that, but, it's just crazy, some of the torture devices they come up with, and I came across one called a knee splitter. Now, this wasn't a fatal device, although once again through gangrene, sepsis, infections, things like that, it could be. But basically, it was during the Spanish Inquisition, known for its great minds when it comes to torturing people. I guess no one did it better than someone trying to make you believe in a God that, you didn't want to, never mind. But anyway, what this thing was it was like a collar, and it had these spikes that came down, and they would wrap this thing around your knee, and they would start twisting it almost like, a wine press or something like that. And these spikes just kept coming in and coming in and coming in until they went right through your knees, totally disabling that, that appendage. But it would be something very slow and very painful. And it would end up, if it didn't kill the person in the long run, it would end up crippling them for life,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was one of those nice little jobs that they came up with.
Yeah.
Sounds like the thumb screw that they used instead of on the kneecaps, they used it on the thumbs and fingers, and it was the same. It sounded like the same thing where they'd screw it down with the spikes until it's crushing your finger and everything. So
they
didn't really kill them unless you got infection.
Right.
But,
and, they had a skull crusher that, did the same thing,
Yeah.
It was like a wine press, and they would just keep turning this thing until, first your eyeballs would pop out, that'd be the first thing to go. And then your skull would just be turned to mush, So yeah, all kinds of fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Audra, you got any other goodies for us over there in your bag of tricks?
Well, so there's the Tiger Bench, if you've ever heard of that. That was basically used in, I believe, like the ancient Japan, or China, one of them. So this was, you were strapped sitting upright to a board. Like, it was almost like, think about a chase lounge. You're sitting up, but you can extend your legs. You would be strapped to this sitting upright. So you obviously couldn't move, and you would have one strap over your knees, but it stopped at your knees. So then what they would do is they would slowly add stones or bricks underneath your heels, your feet. So slowly your leg would start up and go up until it snapped at the knees.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And
I have no idea why they called it the Tiger Bench, because it had nothing to do with tigers. I was a little disappointed, but, it basically snapped your knees back.
Wow.
Like forward. If you've ever seen someone break their legs and they break it at the knee and their leg goes forward.
Yeah, just the opposite direction of how it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
Now
they would do that and it was slow, and, I would imagine most people caved before their legs broke, told it was too extracting.
That would do it. that would do it.
Yeah.
Now I know there's a number of different ways, and go just not really jumping topics, but bouncing around a little bit. Back during the time of the Salem witch trials, there was a number of different torture methods that they used during that time.
Oh yeah.
Now, contrary to popular belief, there weren't any witches burned at the stake in the United States. That was done over in Europe. That had nothing to do with this. But some of the other and the reason I brought this up is because I've probably got an expert sitting here on the subject of witches, witchcraft, and Salem witch trials. So there has been several of them that we have heard of. Can you elaborate on any of those, Audra, as far as maybe something we haven't heard of, something that's not so common that, you don't hear about every day?
So in the Salem witch trials, some of the things, which the interesting thing is, so yes, some were hung, but the majority of them were not hung. And, contrary to popular belief, like the burned at the stake thing never happened in America. And being hung was like, that wasn't as common as you think. So a lot of the witches who were a lot of the witches who were accused and, you know, prosecuted and whatever, they were actually killed by forms of torture to extract information or to get a confession. So Giles Corey, he was an 80-year-old man who was accused of witchcraft in Salem. They actually were trying to get him to confess to witchcraft by pressing, which ultimately killed him. He's an 80-year-old man, and you're pressing him. If you know anything about pressing, that's just, it's like stoning someone to death, only you're slowly adding weight on top of them. That was actually to torture him to get him to confess. And ultimately it killed him. So that's commonly known as an execution in Salem, the pressing, but it really was more used as, torture to extract information. The other interesting thing is in Salem, people who were, charged with witchcraft and, they were being persecuted and all of this stuff. What ended up happening was, for whatever reason, the settlers, the Puritans, believed that, water's pure. You know what I mean? Water is pure. So what they would do to try and get a confession, or rather the people who wouldn't give a confession, they would try and find out for themselves, witches are tainted and they're, pure things are not gonna accept them. And that was their mindset when they would throw witches into the water, the rivers in Salem, because they believed that because the water was pure, they would tie their hands and their feet and throw them in the river. And they believed that if they were pure, they would drown, but the water would accept them. But if they were witches, they would float and they wouldn't drown, which was a weird thing. They all drowned, clearly. So, there is that. And women, not even just women, the men who were accused of witchcraft too in Salem were, they were subject, believe it or not, they were subject to rapes, beatings, children were subject to the same stuff. And this is stuff that history books won't tell you, like you won't find the evidence of like a child being severely abused, whether it was sexually or physically, because they were accused of witchcraft, and it almost correlates to, if you look at psychology, when it comes to come earlier than later than the Salem witch trials, back in the early 1900s and even late 1800s, women who would go mad or would have like a psychotic break or anything like that, or even before that, some women were accused of witchcraft. They believed that like some of the cure for hysteria and shit like that was, I don't know if you heard that. That was my cat. But they believed that, sexual activity, rape and orgasms and all of that stuff was a cure for stuff like that. It was hysteria when we realized that, there's no women flying around on brooms, right? Prior to that, it was, used as a cure for witchcraft. It's insane.
No, Any form of torture is the people thinking of it, the people doing it. Your executioners or your torturers or who whoever they were, dungeon masters or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah,
these guys were sick to begin with. I mean, they were sadists. And it just is. There were so many different ways and everything you can think of, and everybody's heard of, the bamboo shoots under the fingernails, peeling fingernails off, flaying, which is, tying you to the stake and peeling off your skin strip by strip, and how miserable can you be, I mean, because you're awake, through all of this. It's just insane. I just, again, can't fathom how people can come up with this. And like you said, it's not gone anywhere. It's still very much alive today. People are still torturing people, where it be the drug cartels down in Mexico, the gangs in, Ireland, the serial killers or serial rapists or whatever here today, in the United States. It still happens, and it still happens everywhere. And people are still sitting around thinking of new and improved ways to hurt somebody, and make it last as long as possible. I did a thing a few years ago, and it was one of those things that I almost wish I hadn't done, but it was just my curiosity got the better of me. So I had to check it out. And there is a video, Audra, you may have seen it. I think it's called 3 Men and a Hammer. And it was the case of these two guys in, I believe it was Russia, that had kidnapped this guy, took him out to the middle of the woods, and slowly beat him to death with a hammer and videotaped the whole thing. Yeah. Okay. And you can still, all you got to do is type that search into Google and it will come up. And I know now anybody listening to this show is going to be sitting there going crazy, looking this thing up. It is so long and so brutal and so drawn out, that it just literally turned your stomach to watch this, because this guy's just, getting pummeled over and over and over again. And these guys are taking turns with his hammer, beating this guy's brains in, literally, Yeah.
Even turning the hammer around and using the prongs to stab him in the, to hit him in the head with that. Fun fact about that one, that was actually the first death gore video I ever saw when I was, my God, probably 17 or 18. But it was actually, it was three guys, and they were between the ages of 15 and 18. Okay. They were children.
It was. Yeah. And the thing is, the guy's wife, the victim's wife, didn't want it pulled off the internet. She wanted to leave it up there just to show, because these guys were all arrested, tried for murder. I don't know whatever happened to them after that. It was enough. But I mean, you talk about something that jack you up for a while. If you're not used to seeing stuff like that, and you see stuff like that, it will jack you up. You will think about that for a long time. Time.
Yeah. But we honestly could do an entire episode of videos like that, and that would be like that would.
Do you ever watched anything like that, Alexis?
No, only because I already know that the idea of even watching that happen makes my stomach turn. I can watch horror movies with torture in it because, it's a horror movie. but actually seeing the soul leave somebody's body from being tortured to death, I don't think I could handle that.
Yeah, it's a completely different thing, and it really, and like you said, I mean, I've been brought up, watching slasher flicks. I love watching horror movies. That's pretty much. There's not, a week goes by that I haven't watched at least 2 or 3 horror movies, during the course of the week. But and even what's the one with Art the Clown that's out now? Terrifier.
I love that.
Yeah, you watch that and that's brutal, man. That is a brutal flick. But it's still
so cute. He's so cute.
Yeah. He's got that winning smile that all the ladies love. You can
I don't know. Art is like, I have a soft spot for him. I mean, and like even as I'm sitting there watching the second Terrifier, okay, and he's got the girl and he's slashing her up, and then he's pouring bleach on her and he's rubbing salt on her. I'm sitting here like, he's so cute. But when it comes to
you're twisted, Audra.
You have no idea. Listen, okay, because we're on the subject of 3 guys, 1 hammer, right?
Yeah.
I got turned on.
All right. Well, hey, listen, guys. I'm gonna interrupt you. Okay. Again, I'm running into technical difficulties. I cannot hear you any longer. You just cut out again. So I don't know what's going on with this. We are anyway closing in on just about time to wrap up anyway. So with that, I wish I could hear you guys. This is something I've got to work on. I don't know what the hell's going on with this. But thank you for joining us tonight, and I appreciate it. Audra, I love the new look.
Thank you.
Alexis, keep smiling, babe, and get a little more research on all these fun things. We'll have another show about torture and all that kind of fun stuff again later on. But we do have one more show. We're going to try and squeeze out one more show before the end of the year. And this one's going to be kind of interesting. It's something that's kind of affected a lot of us, a lot of you out there, and that's this mystery illness that's going around. What the hell is this stuff, man? It kicked my ass. We're going to talk about that and maybe, I don't know, get into a little conspiracy theory on it maybe and find out what the hell's going on. Anyway, with that, guys, once again, I appreciate it. Love you, ladies. And guys, as always, keep it spooky. Night.
Night.
All right, guys, you know the deal. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future episodes, feel free to email us at transcendingveils@gmail.com. Also, be sure to follow Transcending Veils on social media platforms such as TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And don't be afraid to swing by D.E. Riley and myself's personal Instagrams at NotReallyWilly and at Audra Moon _. We got some spooky stuff going on there too. So until the next episode, can't wait to hear from you guys.